Hello, Morim here. Today I want to present to you a companion build. Well, kind of, it's actually a lightning storm build, but I included companions and made them work, so the wolves are not dying. I'm using wolves. We are running around with pets. The thing about pets is they scale exceptionally bad with your stats. However, they inherit your armor value 1-to-1. So when you stack armor, you're getting tanky, you're not getting one shot, and your wolves are not getting one shot. And the best thing about them is they respawn if they do die. The respawn time is not all that long, so you basically don't have any downtime on this. Now we can combine this one with a specific aspect called the Shepherd's aspect. Now this aspect increases the damage you deal with core skills by a substantial amount for each active companion. Now I tested this with ravens, but ravens do not work, so the only active companion we are going to look at is the wolf. Now I am also utilizing Creeper, Poison Creeper, because of a Spirit Boon. This Spirit Boon is Pack Leader. So when we critically strike, we're going to reset the cooldown on Poison Creeper and our wolves. Now our wolves deal exceptionally bad damage. Like truly atrocious amounts of damage. I cannot stress enough how little damage they deal. They need a substantial buff, like 10 times, maybe even 50 times the damage they currently deal to be considered good. But the buff you're getting for your damage, due to them being there, is so good, I'm not going to give them up. Also, wolves, we have pets. Now, what can we actually clear with this build? Content that's at your level, so basically this build can get you to level 100 without any sweat. Even on a hardcore character, we take basically no damage. We have a lot of defensive cooldowns, we have a lot of damage reduction, a lot of armor, so it's very nice to play. And we are also not going to utilize RNG in this build, because we are not going to use Earth Might, but Perfect Storm. Yes, this is a Lightning Storm build without Earth Might. Now to rail in your expectations, we are going to only run a tier 44 dungeon. This one is 3 levels above our character level, which is basically all you need to do. Because your experience is not going to scale more than this. If you go 4 levels above your character, you're basically not getting any increases to rewards. At least not substantial reward increases. Now, some gear pieces are going to drop with high item power, more consistent, meaning if you do tier Nightmare Dungeon tier 70 dungeons, you're more likely to get item power 800 plus gear. But only a few specific builds in the game can even attempt to clear those difficulties, because of how scaling works. First, we're going to pull enemies together, pop our Hurricane, pop our Poison Creeper, which we do all the time. That's the basic rotation of this build. This will give us a more damage multiplier. This will stack up our armor very, very fast. When you look at the disobedience stacks, you see we are basically constantly near the 80% mark without Hurricane. When we pop Hurricane, when we pop our Poison Creeper, we are getting and climbing up to 100. So the next pack we're going to engage here, same thing. We basically do not need Hurricane and Poison Creeper at this level, but it is a nice benefit. Next, a juicy pack. We pop the same skill rotation and delete the whole screen. In the next clip, we are also popping our skill rotation. However, we are getting stunned. So that's why we have our Earthen Bulwark. We need to pop it to get out of the stun and not get deleted. However, we also applied our damage reduction from our Topaz gems, which amount to quite a lot. In the next clip, I was waiting for my cooldowns, grouping up enemies together, and then I went blasting. For this specific enemy case, I was fishing for vulnerable with my Storm Strike, because most of our damage is coming from vulnerable, is coming from those multipliers. So we want to apply it to bosses and elite enemies that are specifically in single target range. This will enable us to hit for 500,000 with each Storm Strike. 300 to 500,000 is basically what we usually see. I've seen 800k with some crits when the stars align and all our multipliers are getting stacked together. But that's very rare. Now for this specific enemy, we are seeing quite a few modifiers that are not beneficial for us. Specifically frost modifiers are extremely deadly for basically any build with just one instance of unstoppable. But also here we deleted the boss with the right setup. And for the last enemy, I was fishing for a bit of spirit. I didn't want to kill it right away. For the next party of enemies, I'm also going to do the same rotation, pop our hurricane, run in, pop our poison creeper, and that's it. For this specific pack, I didn't have those cooldowns, but I was stacked already, so I just went in and deleted the whole pack. And for the boss, this boss is a little bit wonky, but I wanted to highlight something. First, the overcharge damage. It is basically just 20k per crit, so it is substantial but not super juiced. For the next instance, I was trying to fish for a vulnerable proc. I got it, and I started blasting. Our damage is extremely high in this specific window, but this specific boss also has a lot of CC that is not good for us, since we only have one unstoppable source. So whenever he throws down his storm, we are not able to cast. Now for the gear, first I'll go over the aspects. We are going to pick up might, aspect of the might, because we are going to auto attack quite a lot with our storm strike, so our builder. This will give us a 20% damage reduction combined with the 25% we already get from storm striking, so quite a substantial amount. Next for the chest, we can also put this one on the pants. We're going to go with Disobedience, because Disobedience is basically busted. It's the strongest aspect in the game defensively, speaking because of how armor works. There are no diminishing returns on it. So if I have 54% mitigation for physical damage, half of that is applied to non-physical damage. We are also going to multiply this one with Disobedience, and we are nearly getting like 80 to 90% damage reduction for physical damage equal to our level. The physical damage caps at 85% damage reduction, so basically 15% of the damage is always going to come through. However, there is a case to be made that elemental damage is not capped at that 85%, so half of that, but takes into account the 100%. So it's basically up to 50% less elemental damage taken and up to 85% less physical damage taken. We can then apply our other damage reductions, like damage reduction to close enemies, damage reduction to poisoned enemies. All of those will then reduce the damage further. Resistances are completely useless, so do not ever pick those. Now for the gloves, I'm going with Inner Calm. Now Inner Calm is completely crap, because whenever we stutter step just a tiny amount, we're going to lose the buff and need to stack it up again. This makes this exceptionally bad. However, we need to channel our lightning storm sometimes, and sometimes we also do not need to move. So then we are going to get a 30% multiplier to our damage. Is there another option? Yes, we can run with a two-hand weapon instead of a totem and a one-hander. Then we can omit this aspect and to just multiply, for example, the barrier one or the lightning storm dancer one. Since we are already at the weapon, I'm going with lightning dancer. Here, this one came already on this weapon, which is absolutely nutty. It is a very, very strong weapon. Now, I have a totem here. This totem has a lot of critical strike chance. We have cooldown reduction here. We have lucky hit chance. We have willpower and the barrier aspect here, so conceded. That's 25% more damage whenever we have a barrier. We combine this then with Earthen Bulwark. So Earthen Bulwark can be used as an offensive cooldown as well as a defensive one. You have to keep in mind it's your only source of unstoppable. So if you get frozen, stunned, or basically anything that's crowd controlling our character, we need to have this cooldown available. So we don't want to really use this. This makes the boots here basically not that good, because those boots are giving us a 25% movement speed buff whenever we get unstoppable. But we want to save our barrier, so we are not really benefiting from this. A better aspect on those boots would have been the one that gives us movement speed on crit, that only scales to 16%, but that's basically 16% permanent movement speed. And for the pants, I am going with a bonus to Earthen Bulwark, since this is a defensive cooldown. However, there is one I want to show you that's a better one. I'm talking about the aspect of the protector. This one gives us a massive barrier every 30 seconds basically. Whenever we damage an elite enemy, we get a 7k barrier. This one is much better than Earthen Bulwark at this point, because we're getting a regular mitigation that we can use outside of CC. So when we engage a large pack with a fat, juicy amount of elites, we are going to have a barrier up that is going to save our life, potentially. Currently we have 10k life. With this one we have basically 17k life, which is nice versus those packs, especially later on. This would help us get into the pack, stack up our armor with disobedience, and then we can juice them. As for the amulet, we're going with the shepherd's aspect here. This one gives us up to 8% additional damage per companion. That's a multiplier, but are getting scaled to 12% because it is on an amulet. And I'm not entirely sure if this one is not multiplicative per companion, meaning 12 times 12 times 12 because of the wording. But if not, it's still 36% because we have 3 wolves. Those wolves inherit our armor, so they are not dying constantly, and they are also respawning quite fast. So this one is perfect for our character because it's nearly permanent 36% more damage. Then the aspect of the stampede. This one gives us additional companions, 1 specifically here, so it's basically 12% more damage. Now I like to have this one because our companion abilities are also getting a quite nice boost. So specifically Poison Creeper. Poison Creeper doesn't deal that much damage, so it's not that good, but we are getting consistent damage increases. Now you could also use Edge Master here, so up to 20% more damage, but Edge Master depends on the primary resource we are going to have at the time of using the skill, and if we are depleted, we are going to have no bonus from Edge Masters. So this one is more consistent and better. And for the last aspect, I'm going with Overcharge. Now Overcharge has only a small chance to trigger. That's 10%, not much, but currently you cannot really get a 20% one because the damage value scales with your level, and you cannot find, for some odd reason, any gear piece with the maximum value. I have one example of this in my stash, currently here. That's a 91 aspect right here, right there. The item power is 775 and the percentage is high, but the damage is less than half of the one that I could imprint through the codex. Now when we look at something else, like for example, one that I have extracted earlier, this one also scales with the item power of the item. So it's not level dependent, but the codex one scales with the level. So it's strictly better to use the codex one because you will not be able to get the high damage you get on this one. Now as for the stats, for the helmet, maximum life, total armor, life on kill, poison creeper levels are nice to have, but I would much rather prefer intelligence or willpower or dexterity for board. Then your armor, go for damage reductions to close, distant, flat damage reduction, life, or total armor. Total armor is exceptionally good, so I basically run it on all my gear pieces, total armor, total armor, total armor. But you could also get it on your amulet, which is also fine, but it is very contested, so maybe not that good to omit a damage or utility stat here. But chest and pants, damage reduction, armor, life. For your gloves, go for crit strike chance against injured enemies. So if an enemy is below 35% health, you're getting the bonus. That's 15.8%. Combined with the poison creeper modifier that we get, that's 20%. We are basically crit capped without overmight, which is quite nice. We get to currently, we get to currently 45%. With injured, we are 61%. With poison creeper, we are at 81%. So that's quite nice. For the boots, willpower, intelligence, movement speed, dodge chance. Dodge chance is very nice. There is also a modifier that's called damage reduction versus injured. This one can get to around 30 to even 40%. I think 35%. 35% is the top roll, which is massive for a single stat. That's a single stat. It's not multiplied with anything. It's insane. It's really good. So if you can roll it on your boots, go for it. Then your amulet. Your amulet is exceptionally contested for stats. There is ranks to envenom, which is a damage multiplier for a crit. So with 3 ranks, that's basically 30% more damage. Very strong aspect. We also get movement speed on killing an elite. Both of those are exceptionally strong on this build since we are not getting consistent 25% additional movement speed for our boots with Unstoppable. And then there is another wildcard. You can get a modifier that reduces damage taken by basically close enemies, distant enemies, poisoned enemies. You can get total armor, which is the preferred one. Damage reduction versus fortified is not good, but I didn't have any other amulet that was close to this one. So 3 stats are perfect for our build. The 4th one is not, because we don't have fortify up all the time. We basically only cover the lower portion of our health with Earthen Bulwark. That's 18%. Fortify, that's basically nothing. Then our rings go for crit strike chance. That's important on both. We want to have lucky hit chance on both, preferably. I only have it on one. Then vulnerable damage and then crit damage. Crit damage is found here. You can go for lightning crit damage or flat crit damage. Doesn't matter, the stats roll the same. And those are your rings. So crit chance, then lucky hit chance, then vulnerable damage, then crit damage. Either flat crit damage or lightning crit damage. You can also roll life on your rings. A juicy life roll on your rings is going to benefit you greatly when you're trying to push higher nightmare dungeons. So specifically this build is probably going to go to around 65, 70, but at my current gear I cannot push any higher than 50. 50 is quite drippy with the current gear setup, because we are missing one modifier to basically all our reductions. So for the weapon you can go for a two-hander or one-hander. I personally am currently using a one-hander because of the cooldown reduction and the crit. This has to do with Hurricane. Hurricane has a long downtime. With cooldown reduction you can get this one to near permanent uptime, which is going to generate your disobedience stacks, are going to generate a 25% less damage dealt to enemies, and you're also going to slow enemies, which is beneficial to our keystone. As for stats, go for vulnerable damage with lightning damage, willpower, core skill damage, and then distant enemies. Close enemies is okay, because we are in close range most of the time, but core skill damage is preferable. As for the type of weapon, we are going for an axe. I only have a mace here because, well, it's nutty, so why not pick it? You can get around a 50% damage to healthy enemies on this one with an axe, so that's preferable. Like I said, a two-hander on this build is going to outperform it, because we can just drop this gauntlet modifier. So we don't want to go with inner calm when we are using a two-hander. We want to use lightning storm on our gloves then, and go for the barrier one on our two-hander. So when we use our barrier, we have a 50% more damage multiplier. And for your totem, go for lucky hit chance, very important, crit strike chance, go for cooldown reduction, willpower. You can also go for damage reduction. So there is quite a lot of stats you can get here. Now, next, let's go over the spirit boons. We go for damage reduction with wariness versus elites. Then we go with Aven Wrath. 30% crit strike damage is nice to have. Every bit counts. So if you have 300 crit strike damage, you're going to get a 10% boost to your damage, basically. But you can also go with increased crit strike chance, especially early on, because this one will help you get your crits. I'm currently pretty much juiced with crit chance. So we are nearly at 100%, which is not something you usually see. So during leveling, this one is better. As for the wolf cluster, we want to go with energize. So this one is going to give us more spirit to use our lightning storm. And we are also going for pack leader. Pack leader is going to reset our companion abilities on a critical strike. We critically strike quite often, so this one is going to reset quite a lot. This will give us poison creeper. And poison creeper is a damage multiplier because of a legendary node. We are going to go over the Paragon Board in a while. And for the last one, for the snake, go with overload. This one is basically the only useful one out of this raw. Every other one is unusable. Obsidian slam, no. Masochistic, no. And calm before the storm, no, absolutely not. So for the abilities, I'm going to quickly go over this board because there's not much to say. So first we go for Storm Strike with Fierce Storm Strike for a vulnerable debuff on our enemies. This one will be applied quite regularly. We want to auto attack to use our Storm Strike quite often because we want the damage reduction from Storm Strike specifically. That's 25% right on here. And we get also 20% through our might aspect. So that's a lot of damage reduction we don't want to miss out on. Then we max out our lightning storm, go for primal lightning storm to immobilize targets with an 8% chance. We get wild impulses for a damage buff. We get predatory instinct for more crit versus close enemies. So that's also not included in the 81% we have versus injured enemies. It's basically 87%. That's very, very good. Pick up Earthen Bulwark with the enhanced Earthen Bulwark. That's very essential to the build because that's the unstoppable source we are lacking currently. And preserving bulwark is just nice to have. You don't really need it. It's there for a little bit more tankiness. Then vigilance, whenever we use our earthen bulwark, we get a 15% damage reduction. Like I said, that's nice to have because usually we don't have all that uptime on our damage reduction with vigilance. But when it's getting really spicy and you're getting CC'd and swarmed by enemies, you want to press your earthen bulwark and get out, and having that additional damage reduction and the barrier is going to help quite a lot. Then in the next cluster, we want to pick up Poison Creeper, go for Brutal Poison Creeper, which is a 20% additional chance to critically strike enemies strangled by Poison Creeper. Then we want Nature's Reach. Nature's Reach is quite nice, but only applies to distant enemies. And we want one rank, just one rank in the Wolves. Wolves do not get tankier with more ranks, and those modifiers here are not going to increase the damage we deal at all. So they are basically useless. Then we pick up the cluster here. Elemental Exposure for a vulnerable chance. We have Bad Omen for a 30% chance any damage we deal to shoot down a lightning bolt on enemies. We are applying vulnerable all the time, immobilize all the time. So basically this one is a 30% chance on all our abilities to apply this. So modified by the base lucky hit chance of our abilities. But you know what I mean. Next, Electric Shock. So this one is spicy because we immobilize our targets with our Poison Creeper. Then we apply this, which is an 80% more multiplier versus immobilized targets if we proc this one. So we want a lot of lucky hit chance, as you can see, because we have a lot of lucky hits that are very good. Then we pick up Hurricane. Hurricane is here for Enhanced Hurricane to slow targets. This pairs nicely with the Keystone, which I will go over next. And Savage Hurricane, which decreases the damage enemies deal by 20%, which is basically 20% damage reduction. We then pick Envenom. Envenom multiplies our crit multiplier. With the 3 ranks we get through the amulet, this is a 60% more damage multiplier. Whenever we crit, this is so strong. It's one of the strongest passives in the entire game. 60% more damage on just 3 points. Insane. Then we have Defiance, 12% more damage versus elites. We get Circle of Life, because this is basically the only heal we can get that's reliable. And Natural Disaster, which is basically 12% more damage when we damage an immobilized target, which is whenever we Poison Creeper. So that's another 12% more multiplier. And for the Keystone, we're going with Perfect Storm, because Perfect Storm gives us Spirit quite a lot, especially with Hurricane. Whenever we use a Storm Still, we are granted 1 Spirit and 15% increased damage when we damage a vulnerable, immobilized or slowed enemy. And all 3 CC options and debuff options are available to us. Vulnerable when we use the Exploit Glyph, immobilized when we use our Poison Creeper, and Hurricane is going to apply slowed. This means we are regenerating quite a lot of spirit, so we don't need to really think about external sources for our spirit generation. And this is a 15% more damage multiplier. Lightning damage lacks damage modifiers like this, so this is perfect for our build. Next, we're going to look at the Paragon Board. We're going with the Exploit Glyph in the starter cluster. This is especially efficient with our points. We need a lot of points, so that's great. We also grab quite early those nodes because we get a lot of armor in this cluster, 200 to be specific. In the next board, we want to grab Constriction Tendrils, another lucky hit. This one scales with a lucky hit chance. It is quite nice and we can apply it with all our damage. We don't need to be a werewolf to apply poison, which we then can use with Envenom. For the glyph in this one, we go with Spirit, which gives us a ton of critical strike damage and a more multiplier whenever we crit an enemy. We then in the next board go for Ancestral Guidance, another 30% more damage whenever we use enough Spirit, which is all the time. There is a few nodes here that give us Spirit on kill. Those are also nice to have, especially on this build. We then move through here and grab the glyph that's called Fulminate, because Fulminate is going to give us a more damage multiplier to healthy and injured enemies with our Lightning Storm. We also get quite a lot of lightning damage, flat lightning damage. So this is an increased to our damage in the increased bucket. Very nice to have. However, early on, when you do not have this glyph at 15, you need to have this glyph at 15 to apply the dexterity. If you do not have this glyph at 15, this one is stuck at 17 out of 25 dexterity and we do not get the more multiplier. In this specific case, it is not worth it to go through here, but we go through here to get to this board earlier, especially during the leveling process, and get the glyph here, which is Keeper, which gives us a nice juicy modifier that we can get quite early. We only need 25 intelligence here to get a 10% more damage multiplier. We also get storm skill damage through the rare node here, and we also get damage reduction versus vulnerable enemies, which is also quite beneficial. Then we move up here through those crit nodes, because those are really strong. There is a lot of crit damage here. Then we get Thunderstruck, which is another legendary node that gives us a more damage multiplier. We are multiplying our critical strike damage versus vulnerable enemies and immobilized enemies with this one. Meaning we have a crit. This one is then getting multiplied by 60% due to Envenom, and then again multiplied through Thunderstruck by 30%. The nodes up here are just insane. We get a lot of crit damage and a lot of vulnerable damage, which is both a multiplier. And then we attach the last board for heightened malice. Whenever we use our Poison Creeper, we are going to poison a lot of enemies around us, and those will give us then a 45% more multiplier. Now, whenever we move out or kill all enemies that are poisoned, we are not going to get this benefit. So it's basically a burst benefit, just for bursting targets. And whenever there is 3 elites stacked on top of each other, you can poison all of them, and you can get for the whole fight the 45% damage multiplier. On this board, we can go here, damage versus crowd-controlled enemies, because we are going to Poison Creeper on immobilized targets all the time and going to slow them. We are going to apply this damage. Bosses are another topic, but basically all our focus is on clearing dungeons. So 99% of the time you're going to CC enemies. So those nodes are really nice. You also get maximum life, which is quite beneficial. And then for the last one, we're going to go and grab the resistance nodes. Not because we want the resistances, but we want the armor. There's quite a lot. There's 50 armor here, 100 armor here, and another 50 here. So 200 armor, which translates to roughly 3 to 4% damage reduction. So I'm going to include a talent planner down below, a maxwell one, so you can look at the stats for the gear pieces and the Paragon Board, as well as the skill tree without much issue. Now I know this build is not the juiciest one. It is nice for those that want a companion ability build that is not reliant on the werewolf unique Tempest Draw. I specifically am 95 and have not found it. Look at my stash. I have 1, 2, 3, 4 Crone Staffs. The Tempest Draw helmet is extremely rare, to the point of me not wanting to build around it, even if I get it, because for the average player, you're not going to get to enjoy the Tempest Draw builds. Anyway, this sums up the build guide. Make sure to leave a like, sub and comment. Tell me what you think about this one. I know it's not the juiciest one. I know it's not going to push the highest difficulties right away, but it has potential. And we are using companions, specifically the wolves, that are not going to die instantly, which is nice to have because we have pets that are keeping us company. We are not alone anymore. Anyway, see you next time and bye.